Hey everybody, welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 123 I believe it is. Thank you for joining me. Sorry it's been a while. Don't know what I'm opening up with. Just a little something as always in lieu of theme music. Hope everybody's doing well. I know it's a difficult time to say the least. And I'm sorry I don't do this more often. I do it as much as I can. And, I'm always hoping to offer a little comfort or wisdom or something. Not that I'm particularly wise. I'm just trying to share things that have meant something to me when I've been struggling in the past. And it's not the intention of this podcast. It's not sort of how it began, but it's how it ended up, right? We don't get to choose how things work out. Like, we don't get to choose the cards we're dealt. We just have to learn how to play them. Do you know what I mean? And that's it. Acceptance, we're here. This guy's president. He got inaugurated since the last time I spoke with you, and I don't want to sit here and get into any kind of I told you so, and I don't want to rehash, all the insanity that gets thrown at us every day. I want to make a few points that I've made repeatedly on this, podcast, and that's about what we're up against, how he's become such a cultural brand to so many people that they don't see the lies, they don't see the danger that he poses, not just to democracy, but to the whole planet, to the environment. They're not paying attention to the details in terms of these appointments, which he's getting away with, basically, right? Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense. Sean Duffy is the, Secretary of Transportation. We can see how well that's working out. I don't know if you saw the press conference this morning, but it was pretty disheartening stuff to have a guy sit up there and try to blame the previous president, blame an accident that he knew nothing about. He didn't have any of the facts yet. Nobody does, really. We know it's an accident, which are all, a tragedy and essentially preventable. That's why it's called an accident, right? It's not supposed to happen, but sometimes bad stuff happens. And when it does, especially at that level, you keep your mouth shut and you wait till the investigations are done, especially when it involves the military and it involves passengers from overseas and it involves commercial flights. Like, you don't just get up and spout off at the mouth like he did in his press conference, but he couldn't help himself, right? Because the thing you have to understand about Donald Trump is he can't let the attention be about anybody but himself. That's why he called into a news program on the morning of 9/11, because New York was having the biggest story, albeit the most tragic thing that's ever happened in our city, before the COVID pandemic. Like, he couldn't stand that people were talking about New York City and not mentioning his name in the same breath, so he called up, the TV stations. And I had it on good authority that he was in Mar-a-Lago that weekend with another couple. The guy who was part of the couple has since passed away, but he told Crane's business report way before Trump was president. You're talking like, I read this, like early 2000s, a couple years after 9/11, like that he was bullshitting, that he wasn't even in New York City. He was down there with this other couple and Melania, and he just called in and lied. And who knows? He's gotten away with so many lies in his life. It doesn't matter beyond the point of that's what he was doing this morning, right? He saw that everybody was going to be talking about this awful tragedy, and he wanted to go into the press briefing room and commandeer the headlines. And if you needed any other proof of what a horrible human being he is, let alone a leader, all you had to do was listen to what he was saying. He was talking out of both sides of his mouth. He was blaming the military, which is like, you're the commander in chief, dude. You don't throw the military under the bus. You don't throw some guys that are on a training run or whatever they were doing under the bus. They're doing it on behalf of our government. They're in the military. They're serving right there. You never served in your life. You dodged the draft 5 times and sat in the back of your dad's limo and did lines and attacked cocktail waitresses. So we don't need to hear from you, you flea bag, you orange piece of gnarled, disgusting flesh. This is why I don't do this podcast. I can't talk about this guy anymore. And I know nobody's forcing me to do it. It's so unhealthy. We're all being traumatized by this idiot. And the guys that voted for him are not even paying attention. I guarantee you they didn't watch that podcast or that press conference, So he knew if he gets DEI out there, he'll get the storyline that'll appeal to the racists. Oh, this is the woke FAA that made this happen, or the woke military or something. It's so beneath the office of the president, and it's beneath being a decent human. Imagine you're waking up today, the parents of, or the loved one or the spouse of somebody who perished on that plane last night or died in that helicopter. You're waking up on the worst morning of your life. And then you're hearing a guy say it could have been preventable. It was such and such's fault. It didn't need to happen. That compounds your tragedy, especially when your loved one is still under the icy waters of the Potomac. There's such a thing as human decency, and it's the base level requirement for leadership. And when you don't have that, you don't have leaders. You have tyrants and despots and psychopaths, and that's what we have running the United States right now. Make no mistake about it. Trump is as bad as any serial killer who's ever lived, and he's as bad as any boogeyman you've ever seen on the world stage. I promise you. He's got Pol Pot in him. He's got Hitler in him. He's got Mussolini in him. He's just as psychopathic, if not more, because he's such an American creation. And that can be a good thing, or it can be a really, really bad thing. And I think the world's about to find out what the latter part of that statement means, unfortunately. And it's up to us to try and prevent that in any way we can. We have to protest. We have to use every peaceful, nonviolent means at our disposal to fight back. We can't just be retweeting hashtags and talking shit online. Okay, it's time for the boots, the rubber to meet the road kind of thing. It was time a long time ago, but we got lulled into, whatever's happening online. That's a different story, and you've heard me rail about it, and the same shit is still going on. I see people getting grifted every day. Help us fight back. Follow us. Fuck all that noise. If you're still doing that, you're a fool, including me. Listening to me is not fighting back. You can share my opinions with other people. You can be into what I read, or talk about. But you don't get your news from me. You don't get your news on YouTube. What are you doing? Not that MSNBC or CNN is any better, but you got to get it from a few sources. PBS, BBC. Read a couple newspapers. Don't rely on somebody who's trying to make a buck off you, rehashing what some other reporter reported. It's not news if you're not going out and doing the research yourself. You're just repeating shit that you read to other people and passing it off as news. It bothers me because it's a grift, and I've met these people. They don't have your best interest at heart. Trust me. They're rage farming you. They're playing off the outrage. And that's such an American thing, and that's why we're stuck in this hole. And Trump knows that better than anybody else. He uses people's greed against them like judo. He's done it his whole life. He knows as long as he's the focal point of the conversation, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. And the trap that so many fell into was constantly retweeting the actual clips or using his picture to sell their Substacks or all the other things that they're doing every day to say, hey, look at this outrageous clip. Look at this horrible thing he said. They're doing that because it's cheaper and easier than coming up with your own insight and your own content. You can talk about him and write about him without spreading his brand. And we have to understand that because we got our asses kicked in the last election. Whether it was fair or not, it wasn't fair. There was nothing fair about Elon Musk going to Pennsylvania and giving away $1 million, a month before the election. That had never happened before. I wrote about that on Substack. We had no precedent for that. There was no metric to measure that. And it worked, obviously. And now Musk is running D.C. He went in there on day one, started firing people. He fired the head of the FAA. He fired a bunch of top people there. He sent everybody in our government an email that said you can retire now or wait to get fired. Take a payout or test your luck against the MAGA dudes. But I've already promised your job to some plumber from Ohio who says he loves Trump. So time to pack up your desk there, Mr. USDA, DOT, And he's been doing this at the Office of Personnel Management. I don't want to get too wonky in D.C. stuff, but like he's heading to the GSA next and the GAO. You know, he's going to cut off every piece of funding that stands for anything good, that allows any bit of our government to still function. They're going to come after because they don't want it functioning. As I've said a million times, they want serfs. They want poor people who are too broke and unhealthy to do anything about it, right? And then they want those people to be enforced by their fellow countrymen, a bunch of thugs, you know, a shadow army of MAGA dudes. That's why he let the Proud Boys out. That's why every big townie in your town is flying a Trump flag, you know, or a don't tread on me flag. That's why the cops and the firemen are all down with this guy, because he's going to let them be the sort of captains in his army all across the country, and they're going to enforce the law. You know, the my way or the highway MAGAism, and they're going to dress it up in patriotism and screaming eagles and giant pickup trucks and freedom, and here's your AR-15, and you're going to have a country that's going to make Russia look nice, okay? Because we're a lot dumber than a lot of the people that have fell for this in the past. And that's a generalization. I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm just saying, like, we can see how fertile a breeding ground this country is for Trump's rhetoric. Because the internet is that stuff on steroids, you know? Hitler didn't have YouTube and podcasters and Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, and look how much damage he did. You know, there's no telling how much destruction somebody like Elon Musk can do in D.C., and the fact that he's there is as scary as Trump being there. And I've spent a lot of the last few years talking about Trump, and I've spent a lot of time on Substack writing about Elon Musk. I don't think I ever prepared for the combination of both of them at once. And I think that's why we've seen so much damage in the last 10 days or however long it's been. You know, and they've rolled back a bunch of stuff because they're stepping on their own dicks, pardon my French, you know. But so they realize it, and they're getting calls from their own, you know, people within the party like, hey, bud, you might want to rethink this. But the general message has been received. It's my way or the highway. And it's disgusting, and it's not who we are. And to make light of that tragedy or to use it for their political and, you know, gain, to be tweeting about it last night when you're the commander in chief, it's beyond shameful because people are in trauma. DC's a small town at heart, you know, like Virginia, Maryland. People were coming home from work and seeing that stuff and pulling their cars over. So if you grew up in that area, it doesn't matter. You didn't even need to be. It's a national tragedy. It's an airline going down full of people. That's all of our fears, all of us who fly all the time, and anybody else who loves somebody who gets on a plane, which is pretty much any of us. So we're all, you know, suffering trauma in this moment. You don't rub our faces in it or try to use it to get attention on a tweet. Somebody with that little discipline, having control over the nuclear football, and then putting a drunk frat boy in charge of the Department of Defense, like, nobody's gamed out that scenario, probably. Other nations have. Like, I guarantee you intelligence agencies are gaming out every horrible thing that could happen with the U.S. right now, but we haven't prepared for that fully. And that, you know, I was watching Rachel Maddow last night, as you guys probably were, some of you guys, and you know, she broke in with that story, and it reminded me, when I was a kid, Flight 90 was Air Florida flight, and it crashed into the 14th Street Bridge. When I was a kid, we had a big snowstorm from Maryland. I was in PG County, you know, 20 minutes outside of D.C. when that happened. We had the day off school. We all went sledding, but we all saw this horrible plane crash, you know, on TV, where this plane landed in the frozen ice, and some of you guys remember it. A lot of people perished, and in the initial response, the firemen didn't know what to do. They didn't want to get in the water. You know, it was frozen, and like they were watching people drown and kind of frozen in fear. And a regular guy who had been driving by stopped, got out of his car, walked down on the bank, saw that nobody was helping these people, took his shoes off and jumped in the frozen Potomac and saved a bunch of lives. And that guy's name is Lenny Skutnik, and he was an everyman hero. And when I was a kid, that made a huge impact on me. And if you ever watch the State of the Union, which comes up, you know, at the end of every January, they'll always have a hero up in a certain seats, usually next to the first lady. And they'll point him out, the president, and everybody will clap for him. Those are Those are called the Skutnik seats. That's named after Lenny Skutnik. We need more Lenny Skutniks, people who do the right thing without any credit. You do it because it's the right thing to do. So that guy had an impact on me, right? So now I'm 18. I'd moved to New York. I moved back to D.C. as a young man, and I was working on Capitol Hill as a bike messenger. I did that on and off for a few years. And my assignment was the Congressional Budget Office mainly. And I would sit in their library all day, and then I'd go deliver House documents and stuff around Capitol Hill. And I would bring stuff back to the CBO, and I'd go into the mailroom, and this dude would sign for him. And he was a very mild-mannered kind of guy, just a bureaucrat dude who worked in the mailroom, not a man of many words. And he would always sign my paper, my manifest. And one day I looked at it, and I looked at the signature, and it said Lenny Skutnik. And I went back in there. There was a lady who ran the place, and I said, "Hey, this guy's name is Lenny Skutnik. Is he any relation to the Lenny Skutnik?" And she said, "That is the Lenny Skutnik," And I'm so glad you remember who he is. Tell him that. It would make him feel good, And my point in that was like, this guy did a huge act of bravery, and then went back to work, went back to serving our government. And he didn't have a T-shirt on that said, "I'm Lenny Skutnik," and he wasn't taking credit for the heroism or anything, or the fact that they named seats after him at the State of the Union. He went about his life and did his job. That's what a real hero looks like. He did the right thing in the moment because it was the right thing to do. He didn't care about his own well-being. He didn't think about it. He thought, I'm not going to stand here and watch people drown if I can do something about it, right? And that's how we have to feel about the world right now. We all have to find our inner Lenny Skutnik. And if we can do something to stop the suffering, we have to use all of the skills and all of the education and all of the talents at our disposal to do that. Because right now people are hurting. They're suffering. I don't have to tell you. There's women that are showing up with their kids at the border that filled out a CPB app and had an appointment to seek asylum in this country and traveled and waited for many months and got there. And as of last week, their appointments were canceled and the app stopped working. And now people are getting rounded up by ICE agents and shipped out of the country on military transport planes, which cost about $1 million more a trip, than a commercial airline passenger. But they're done to make these people look like prisoners, to put them in shackles and carry them onto a cargo plane. Is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen happen in this country in my lifetime. It's an image that will burn in infamy, and there's so much crap being thrown our way that it hasn't really sunk in how cruel that is. They're setting up Guantanamo to receive immigrants now. Families, women, children. This is not how you treat people. This is not who we are as America. If you buy the myth of America as this land of hard work and opportunity for everybody, if you believe in what the Statue of Liberty stands for, you don't round people up and throw them in handcuffs and deport them, even though we've been doing that forever. Listen to Woody Guthrie, deportees. That kind of racism that Trump represents has been in this country forever. We've been fighting it from the beginning, right? Since the first dudes came here and got off a boat, white dudes that weren't born here, immigrants, right? And they took it from other people because they had guns, right? And they stole the land and they murdered most of the people that were indigenous upon it. And the ones that weren't, they put them on reservations. And even those people are getting rounded up now. The people who really have a claim to this land. Because of some fat fuck, whose mom was an immigrant. Trump's mom got off a boat when she was 17 from Scotland and became a maid in Long Island. Okay? No shame in that, but that's what his roots are. His grandfather fled Germany because he was a coward and he wouldn't join the Bavarian army. So he came to the Pacific Northwest and opened brothels, and sold booze. Okay? They're immigrants. They did what they had to do to survive. She cleaned toilets. He sold pussy. Pardon my French. It's disgusting. Who are you to say you're better than these other people? And the fact that so many Americans support this, that are turning a blind eye to the suffering while they cheer him on. while they fall for bullshit like, you know, women, you know, men in women's girls sports and all these made up stupid things that I see people fall for. I still log on to Facebook. I went to school with the kind of people that buy this bullshit, and they're nice, hardworking people the rest of the time. But you look at their politics and their brains have been warped by racism, and they don't even understand they're chasing ghosts. There are not a bunch of dudes cutting off their penises so they can be on your kid's fucking soccer team. You know, they're making that up because they know you're so stupid and racist that you'll fall for it, and you won't pay attention to the fact that a billionaire is about to pilfer your entire economy. And planes are going to crash into each other in the sky, and the roads are going to stop working, and you're not going to have any health care because they put Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in charge of HHS. You know, they're attacking NIH. NIH saved my life. 20 years ago, this November, I checked into the National Institutes of Alcoholism and Abuse, and I spent a month there, and that's the beginning of my recovery. While I was there, I got introduced to the 12-step program. I participated in a research protocol where I took a bunch of, you know, experimental drugs. But mainly I learned I was powerless over alcohol, you know, that my real problem was addiction, and if I applied the 12 steps, you know, and lived one day at a time, I would get better. And the people who treated me when I was there were angels. These are the best of the best. The National Health Service. You know, they wear epaulets and stuff. Dr. Fauci was in charge at the time. You know, these are guys who could have cashed in and made a fortune in New York City and LA and Chicago and big city hospitals. And they're there in Bethesda working on a campus to save lives. And they can only study fatal diseases. You know, so everything they're studying, you want them to study. You want them to have as much money as possible. You don't want to stop any of these protocols. I was there at Christmas, man. I checked in there right after Thanksgiving, and I was there through Christmas holiday. I checked out a couple days after Christmas, you know. And it was rough. It's rough getting sober. You know, your rehab is never easy, even though this was a great place. But while I was there, I saw these kids in the pediatric cancer ward that were giving their bodies to science, essentially, right? Most of these kids probably weren't ever getting out of there. They were doing it so somebody else's kid could live someday. You know, and when I was ready to leave, I was a little arrogant. I had 30 days under my belt. I thought I had it figured out. You know, they were giving me like a placebo situation or a drug. I didn't know which was which, but I thought there was maybe some magic pill that was going to cure my alcoholism. And I said as much on my last day there to this wonderful counselor who was a wise, sweet guy who used to bring us half smokes when it was his job to watch us at night. If you're from D.C., you know what a half smoke is, okay? Half smoke's the truth, okay? I don't think any of you guys know what a half smoke is. But these guys were angels. And I sat there in my arrogance in the last day, and I said, you know, he said, Noel, you're getting out tomorrow. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go back to New York. I'm going to get a prescription for these drugs, you know, you're giving me, and I'm going to go to these meetings, and I'll be fine. And he said, do me a favor, look out the window. And I looked out the window, and he pointed to the pediatric cancer ward, which was the next wing. And he said, what do you think those families would say if I were to walk into their hospital room right now and tell them that their child with a fatal disease could walk out of here today in full remission if they were to go to a meeting, if they were to work 12 steps, if they were to get a sponsor and call them, if they were to be honest with themselves and another human being about how they were feeling? You think they'd trade places with you? Because let me tell you something. More people die of addiction and alcoholism than die of cancer every year. It just happens in ways we can't measure. Accidents, neglect, not taking care of other issues. But you both have a fatal disease. But you get to walk out of here today, you know, and take it seriously and go to a meeting. And that's the only thing I've ever seen work, and I've been here for 20 years. This is what the guy said to me. And when he put it like that, I got it. You know, if I had diabetes, I would take my insulin every day. Same thing in recovery. You got to be in a program of recovery. If that works for you, that's what works for me. That's what was passed on to me. At a place like NIH, with all the technology and all that stuff, they understood sort of that the spirit is involved in everything. And everybody there was like, as much as they're doctors and research scientists, because that's what they are, it's a research medical facility, they're also holistic. They care about people. They want you to be better. It's the crown jewel of our, federal sort of the things we invest in. I mean, it's just right up there at the top. It's something you don't ever mess with. So messing with that feels personal because I think of the people that are now in jeopardized, not just the patients and the kids and their families that have like been lucky enough to get a spot, because there's not a lot of beds to go around in a place like that, right? But all the people who didn't cash in and went there to do something bigger with their lives, and now their jobs are threatened, their funding is threatened, and that's across all of the government. They diss the bureaucracy. As I've said a gazillion times on this show, bureaucracy is not bad. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass when you're dealing with your health insurance company or something where it really is out of control and it's completely for profit. But the federal bureaucracy, the people who spend their lives working at the USDA and all these other places to sort of protect our agriculture or our environment or our infrastructure, they're trying to make this society work better. A lot of those people do really good work, and they do it anonymously, essentially, and they don't do it for a lot of money, and they don't deserve your scorn. They don't deserve Donald Trump's scorn. They don't deserve a bunch of uneducated people or a bunch of Philistine, dilettante tech bros thinking they can show up and tell everybody to quit. It's not Twitter, okay? It's not Silicon Valley. It's DC. It's people who've spent their lives working. Generations sometimes, right? Because a lot of people from that area stay in that area. My grandfather, my uncle, a lot of my family was in that. My grandfather worked at the NSA in Glen Burnie his whole life. And when he wasn't overseas, when he wasn't in Saudi Arabia or somewhere, or Cyprus, and then he went back and did his thing for the country. And he didn't talk about it. He didn't brag about it. Kept his head down. He went to work. That's a lot of what DC is. That offends somebody like Donald Trump because he doesn't understand it. All he understands is greed and corruption and people with a lot of character defects. That's why he likes drunks and drug addicts and all these crazy people around him. And I'm not dissing drunks and drug addicts. I'm one, right? But I'm in recovery. But you wouldn't, even in recovery, you probably don't want me in charge of something. I'll tell you that right now. I'm not emotionally sober enough to be in charge of anything. I don't want top secrets. Don't tell me. I don't want classified documents. Certainly, I don't want somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who's been in a cult her whole life. You look at her, she's out of her mind. I've been around that kind of stuff a lot. I haven't told you guys about, my father, and he's into all that shit. And I've seen that stuff since I was a kid. I've done a bunch of yoga and a bunch of weird stuff. Like, you can tell when somebody's really drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And that woman's drank a lot of Kool-Aid, So, and she doesn't even understand how crucial a position DNI is. Neither does Trump. They see everything as a negative, as something that's going to stand in their way, in terms of grifting. Or they're following orders from Putin and Saudi Arabia and all the other people that they think are their friends because they're making sure they get some money. And I'm not even talking about the Justice Department, which he's going to weaponize. If Kash Patel is in charge of the FBI, it's game over. That's the Stasi. Somebody's going to kick in your door if they don't like you. I've had my door kicked in by the FBI. For something my mom did when I was a kid, but it ain't fun. It ain't something you want happening because you tweeted about the president. And he's threatening to do that stuff, and the guy I know would do that stuff in a second. But the trick for us is we can't be scared of him. We can't bow down, and we can't be foolish with our energy, Because our skill can only be we can only be effective in countering this if we're completely aware of what's really going on. Once you get angry and all worked up, it's really hard to be effective. So it's a very crucial time because we really need to focus and we really need to not lose sight of the big picture, the empathy. Think of that mother with her kids who's just trying to get in this country. Think of the people that are working hard. in all aspects of the American economy. Immigrants are in all levels of our society doing the same jobs the rest of us are doing. They're going to work. They're trying to go home, take care of their family. Some of them are doing jobs we don't want to do, but they're certainly not all doing that. And most of it is a lot of really skilled labor that we sort of belittle. It's not unskilled labor of being a farm worker. Go check out the United Farm Workers page sometime. Those guys are heroes. The guys that are picking your apples are heroes, and your tomatoes. And they're dealing with climate change, and they're dealing with ice, not the frozen shit that's everywhere in New York. They're dealing with people trying to criminalize them for working hard. And they're making up boogeymen. I've lived in this country 53 years, 54 years. I've never feared an immigrant. I'm not worried about some criminal immigrant gangs. I'm really worried about Donald Trump and Elon Musk and all these GOP sycophants destroying this country. I'm worried about rapey, drunk frat boys, making the military into what it has been at its worst, right? That's why they fetishize the Navy SEALs and the elite troops. If you notice, those dudes are always white because they keep those cushy gigs for the white guys. And they let them do whatever they want. And that's why Trump sort of fetishizes that. And that's why he liked Pete Hegseth, because Hegseth was, into that Navy SEAL guy who his own teammates turned against because he was a murderer. And they're like, this guy's a psychopath and a murderer. And a lot of those guys, not a lot, but some of those guys end up in the armed services. And when they do, you want to get them the F out because it's dangerous for all of us. Incompetency is dangerous. Cruelty isn't dangerous. It's dangerous. It's not a virtue. They're trying to pass off greed and brutality as a virtue, as an American way to be doing things. There's nothing American about that. There's nothing brave about that. There's nothing courageous about that. That's what cowards do. That's what chumps do. Donald Trump is a chump. He's a weak, stupid man who can barely read. Okay, he wears a fucking diaper. That's not a joke. He's incontinent because he snorts Adderall and eats cheeseburgers and dreams about having sex with his own daughter. That's who that guy is. Anybody who spent more than 10 minutes around him knows it. He's out of his mind. And a bunch of these people in this country fell for it for a third time, right? Because they hated Biden so much, because they hate Democrats so much. And they don't even know why. They're just trained to. Because they're ingesting Fox News and Joe Rogan and all this other poison. And then they're looking for, an alternative. And they're seeing the same thing when they check out the left. Because the left is just retweeting everything that Trump said. And then being like super snarky about it. So that's not that appealing either, right? So they just steep in their ignorance. And he gets to do whatever he wants. We can't stand it. Or we can't stand for it, rather. I don't know what else to say. I don't really know what else to say. That's it, We know what this next 4 years is going to look like. It's going to be chaos every day. It's going to be like, can you believe what Trump said? It's going to be like 6 hours of MSNBC talking about him and cable news and fighting on CNN and he did this scandal. Maybe this will be the thing that finally brings him down. And then everybody will pay attention to that trial and that impeachment and that special prosecutor. And he'll get away with it all, and he'll try to hand the country off to Don Jr. or Eric Trump someday. Or J.D. Vance first. It'll be Vance like Don Jr. or something on the next. No, it'll be a woman, But it'll be Kristi Noem or somebody and Don Jr. or J.D. Vance. But who cares? We got to look past the game. We got to look past the outrage. We got to focus on who we are, what we want to stand for, and how we want to proceed. Because it doesn't belong to him. Trump tells you something belongs to him so many times that people believe it. He has no right to be in that office. He had no right in 2016. The Russians helped him get elected. He knows it. That's why he still talks about it. He knows he got his ass kicked in 2020. That's why he still talks about it. He knows he probably screwed something up with the FAA and the flight guys. What are they called? I'm going blank. Air traffic controllers, right? He knows maybe some of the chaos that he caused in the federal bureaucracy in the last week might have contributed to that accident. That's why he woke up this morning and said, oh my God, I better get this narrative out here. It's actually what he did last night, right? Because he tweeted right away about it. So right away, he knew he had some culpability probably. He was the commander-in-chief. The buck is supposed to stop with him. It was a freaking military helicopter. So what does he do? He obfuscates, right? He tries to say some outrageous thing so we'll all react to the outrage. And how can you not? Because it feels like you've never seen it before. And then you think about it and you're like, shit, I've seen this all the time. This is the playbook. This is who he is. And meanwhile, while they're doing that, the guys you're not paying attention to are backing a truck up to the treasury and filling it with cash. You know, that's what Elon Musk is in it for. That's what Russell Vogt is in it for. You know, the Project 2025 guy who's the head of the OPM or OMB. You know, these guys are going to rob you blind, and people are going to be cheering him on because they're mad at the woke left and all this dumb stuff, and then they're going to look around, they're going to be in a wasteland. Or we can pull it back from the brink, and that's what we have to do. We were born in this time. We have no choice. And even if you're exhausted, which I am and which you should be, any sentient being should be, I'm not saying you have to consume this stuff all day. Consume less of it. It'll do you better. You're not going to escape it. You'll hear about it by osmosis, you know, just by dint of how much he wants to command attention. You're going to see the headlines, you know. Pick a couple trusted news sources. Pay attention to it. Know your limits. Do deep dives. You know, read a New Yorker article about it. Read The Atlantic. Check out PBS. Read a novel. Study the human condition, because that's what's really motivating this stuff. You know, you could learn everything you need to learn about Trump by watching a Shakespeare play. You know, he's just like a dumb King Lear. You know, he's a dumb guy. Like, all these guys are motivated by defects of character, by jealousy and greed. Trump never measured up, as I've told you 1,000 times, and you don't need to hear it from me. But like, he's the most insecure, you know, character defect driven human I've ever seen. He literally can barely read. He is not a smart person. He has known that since he was a kid. He has some grandiose ideas which come from addiction, that somehow the Trumps are some special magical breed that are meant to be American royalty, probably because he's ashamed of his mom's roots and how ugly his father is genetically. You know, if you've ever seen a picture of the guy, like, Trump was the best looking one, and we saw how that worked out. Do you know what I'm saying? And he pretends he's good looking. He pretends he has hair. He pretends he has a tan. He pretends he's not wearing a girdle. You know, everything's fake. You don't want fake, inauthentic people in your life. And even if you just take that lesson, the lesson of discernment, that's a spiritual thing, right? Because you got to be really spiritual about what you ingest. Because Trump will make you sick, man. And that's his goal. He wants to make people sick. That's what he's here for. He's here to break things. You hire Trump when you want to break things. He's really good at it. And we can't let him break our spirit. He's going to try to break the economy. He's going to try to break the environment. Don't think otherwise. His job is to destroy America on behalf of his benefactors, on behalf of Putin, on behalf of MBS. They'll be rich. You know, so they like that deal. That's what Jared signed up for the first time. A country based on the Russian model of oligarchs. As long as you're down with the leader, you can control all the resources and make a lot of money. That's what all this, you know, imperialistic talk is about. Taking Greenland, taking Panama. It's about resources. You know, and all these tech bros think they can get a piece of that. Elon Musk certainly will. Mark Zuckerberg is trying to get in there too. Don't use his products. Don't go on Facebook. Don't go on Instagram. Boycott it if you can. I'm not saying you can, but try. I haven't been using it since the inauguration. I haven't checked into Twitter since he was inaugurated, and I don't plan on it. I don't care how many people follow me. I'm not doing this for a buck. You know, I don't need the attention. I need this country to get back on the right track, and we all have to use the powers we have as individuals. If you're getting something out of it, do it. If it makes you less lonely, do it. If it helps you connect and share information, do it. I am not judging that, but examine it. Examine why you're doing it and understand who owns it. and how much do you really want to support that person? And maybe pick something every week that you can kind of focus on in manageable chunks, like the EPA, for example. They put 2 people back in who'd been in the EPA under his first administration, who were chemical industry representatives. They worked for a lobbying company that helped Dow and DuPont and all these guys put PFAS in your water and stuff, which are like these forever plastics and forever chemicals that just stay in you forever, and they give you cancer and they're really bad. John Oliver does a great deep dive on what those things are, and you can just Google it, but lots of gnarly stuff that it's cheap and easy to put into consumer products, and they don't want to change their way of manufacturing because it'll cut into their profit margin. So they hire lobbyists and scientists and people that help them, fudge data and get around, circumvent laws. So those people are back in charge at the EPA, So you can think of those agencies as working on behalf of the industry that they're meant to monitor and police, which they now are. But understand what that means in your life, that the PFAs are going to be in these products. Understand what it means when you pick up a plastic water bottle and drink out of it. Understand what it means if you're eating meat out of some factory farm now. You're not getting the same inspections on that boar's head ham, I promise you. This stuff is going to get gnarly. They're going to cut every corner they can on behalf of industry. And when industry is left to its own devices, greed usually wins out. That's why you have regulations. All of the regulations that you have in the world from the FAA, as we're talking about, they're paid for in blood. Somebody usually died. As I've said many times before you get a regulation or a law passed. It's usually somebody dies, and then they hire a lawyer, and then they spend years on behalf of their loved one trying to get industry to do the right thing and recognize that there's a problem. And sometimes they're successful, and where they've been successful, we have laws that are meant to protect our society. Where they haven't been, we have these holes and things that are already messing us up that you want government to keep going after. That's the idea, right? It's a big country. There's a lot of interests at stake. It takes a while to make progress. So you don't rip down all the progress, but that's what he's doing. Because they don't want that kind of stuff. They don't want a healthier citizenry. They want a richer C-suite, a corporate suite. They want to make the guys that are showing up in Mar-a-Lago and cutting them, $1 million checks for his campaign happy, or 10 million or $1 billion, right? The price is going to keep going up, especially when you're allowed to do whatever you want to do. And that's the motivation by Trump and those guys. And that's what should really scare you. Because you should look at the fact that they're all right, they're making all this money now. How much can I charge them if they could really do whatever they want? How much will an oil company give me if I'll just give them Anwar? If I'll let them fucking drill in the Grand Canyon? How much will that make me? Because that's who these people are. They're not thinking about the greater good. Trump doesn't care about the environment. He doesn't care about the economy. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about me, And it's not just him. It's a whole culture around him now. It's a goddamn country full of people who believe his bullshit. And it's going to take generations to get out of this mess. How many people are going to have to deal with some kid who's 17 right now and he's growing up in a Trump house and he's buying all the bullshit? He thinks DEI is his enemy. He thinks migrants are stealing his future. He thinks Trump is a god who got shot and Jesus saved him, right? Trump said in his inaugural speech that a bullet ripped through my ear. A bullet did not rip through his ear, okay? That was a fake-ass assassination attempt, and he put Sean Connolly in charge of the Secret Service now, the guy who was standing next to his little photo op and his little parade. Nothing about that was real, I promise you. The person died. There's no doubt about that. And the shooter died. But Trump was never in danger. I know Donald Trump. He's not a brave man. The fight thing was rehearsed. The way they walked off the stage was rehearsed. That wasn't a normal situation. That was a campaign commercial. That's why he just tweeted out the book, the coffee table book about it just the other day. As president, he's still trying to sell that book. He'll have the book behind him, at the Resolute desk next time he's speaking from the Oval Office to sell it like a podcaster, hawking his wares. Speaking of which, if you haven't signed up for Noel's Notes, it's a wonderful time. That's as much as a plug as I have. Thank you for all the t-shirts that you guys bought through the years, too. It'll be 4 years I've been doing this in March. I know it's a lot less frequent, but I appreciate all of you guys that have listened since the beginning. I don't know how many people are still around who were here at the beginning, but I know there's a lot of loyal, a lot of really devoted listeners, and you guys mean the world to me. And I don't mean to come and rant at you every time. It's why I do it less, but sometimes it just builds up, and I want to check in with you, and I want, it's all been a scam. That's why I talk about that, like, that assassination attempt. It's not that I'm a conspiracy type guy. It's just he doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt, and he hasn't been honest about all the circumstances, and everybody's just accepted it as fact. The media moved on that day. The media didn't say, hey, we've never talked to a doctor. We've never seen a medical report. This doesn't add up. What about this shooter and his family? We never heard about them again. Like, we've been hearing about Kennedy's assassination for 60 years. We didn't hear about this assassination that apparently was such a big deal that Jesus was involved, that Jesus spared Trump so he could take away your health care, because the problem with America is that people had too much health care, right? So the good Lord looked down and said, hey, that guy, that 79-year-old drug addict who jerks off thinking about his daughter every night, he's the chosen one. I want to lead my people. I think I'll spare him gun violence. And if I have to make the quota up, I'll just take it out on a classroom full of school children next month, because you seem to be numb to that. I mean, it's insane. It's just absolutely insane. It's beyond absurdity. And it happens over and over because he gaslights you. He always does. That's his whole shtick. He's been doing that since the 80s, the 90s. Big corporations and banks helped him bullshit and do it. NBC helped him bullshit. There was nothing real about The Apprentice. He's not a business genius. He was not a billionaire at the time. That was his big paycheck, was having a TV show on NBC. That's why his kids all showed up to get a cut of it too, to get a per diem. If I'm a billionaire's kid, a real billionaire, I'm not doing a game show. I'm not standing in Times Square on Sunday night to see who has a better pop-up shop, Meatloaf or Little John. I'm racing catamarans off the coast of, Seville or something. Not the Trump kids. They want that, craft service table and the per diem, because they weren't really billionaires. They were scammers. Now they're billionaires. He made like $12 billion or something ridiculous the first day he launched his new Bitcoin. His digital coin, whatever the hell it's called, the Trump coin that he launched like the night before, 2 nights before the election. That alone, no other president would have done. It would have been a massive scandal. And it came and went. He's going to profit from the presidency, because now he can, he puts Howard Lutnick in charge of commerce, who's like laundering money through Tether, which is a Bitcoin operation based out of Panama. Howard Lutnick is the head of Cantor Fitzgerald. He was the next door neighbor to Jeffrey Epstein. He bought the house from Jeffrey Epstein. Howard Lutnick's brother brokered the deal. Or Howard Lutnick, rather, bought it from Jeffrey Epstein's brother, who brokered the deal. And they were neighbors for a long time. And then Howard had a bunch of fundraisers for Trump that Trump attended next door to Epstein's before Epstein was knocked off. After he was knocked off, he had all the Steve Winns and Giuliani and all the kind of guys who partook of the services that Epstein was offering to billionaires, which was like, you can sleep with a bunch of young girls in my townhouse and nobody will know. It was a brothel for billionaires. It was down the street from the Koch brothers, 740 Park Ave, just walk across Madison, go in the side door, come on out, go down to Jeffrey's house. Trump was there all the time. Elon Musk was there. These are bad men, and there's compromise, and there's all kinds of criminal activity, and nobody wants to look at it. And now those guys that were involved in this stuff are back in charge. And the ones that didn't go along with it the first time are getting punished. He's pulling protection from General Milley. The guy's a hero, man. The guy's a hero and a scholar. You know, he's a real warrior who's a smart enough man to know what's at stake and to know the world history. And he stood up to Trump, and Trump didn't like it. You know, so now he's pulling the guy's protection, as he is to all these other dudes. You know, he pulled Mike, like, who was the State Department guy from Kansas? I can't think of his name right now. Really, really awful dude. But it was Pompeo, right? Pompeo was Team Trump all the way. And now he lost his security detail. And Iran, you know, you don't want Iran having a fatwa on you. You know, like, they have a long reach. I watch enough TV to know, like, nope, that is not a good deal. So those guys are going to have to pay out of pocket. And they're going to have to look over their shoulders every day. You know, and they might get their own security, but it's not going to be the same thing as what the State Department or the Secret Service or somebody would provide you. And Trump knows that. He wants people to feel threatened. That's what mobsters do. You either pay for the protection or you don't get it. You either go along with the family or you're out. You know, it's as simple as that. It's cartoonish. You've been trained for this as Americans. Like, this is just bad TV. You know, this is just bad TV. But the problem is innocent people are getting ground up in this, you know, and the bad people are getting away with everything. And they've gotten away with it for too long. And it's changing who we are as a people. It's changing our national character because people are getting so enraged and so sick of it that, like, anything that feels like justice or relief gets cheered on, even when it's not necessarily who we are. You know? I don't want to start any fights, but, like, when people were, like, cheering a guy who's killed somebody in cold blood, shot him in the back, and calling him a hero a couple weeks before Christmas, so that guy's kids had to, like, spend a Christmas with their dad recently murdered, and people are like, oh, this is my new bae, and they're sending memes around calling the guy a hero. That's not who we are. That's not a country I want to be a part of. You don't assassinate people. You want to change the health industry, you change it. You get up and vote. You do something about it. You don't cheer murderers. And I know there's people that probably listen to my podcast who think that kid is cool or cute. He's not. Don't listen to me. Okay? Fuck that. So shooting somebody in the back is a punk move. That's not a hero. You're not an assassin. And I don't believe in violence. I'm not going to change who I am. You know? Self-defense is one thing. That wasn't self-defense. And that was a rich kid from Baltimore. You know? So, but it speaks to how online culture and things have changed. We've seen so much of that in recent years. People get, you know, they get this hive mind mentality because they're watching shit on TikTok that's getting them all amped up. And they don't really know what they're talking about, but they're mouthing off about it. And they're responding to the wrong things. You should choose peace. You know, there's a lot of really brilliant leaders and heroes that have told us what to do, you know. Yeah, none of it's working, but murdering a CEO isn't going to work. You know, and I saw people, yes, it does. They've lowered my premiums. No, they haven't. That's not going to solve the problem. Okay? You know, I'm getting off on a tangent there, but it speaks to the larger point I'm trying to make. Like, we can't lose who we are as a people just because we're in such a long season of darkness, you know, and because the relief that we got from it didn't last very long. And it had its own issues. You know, the Biden thing, there was some great legislation that would have made a real difference, and it did for a while, and now that's not going to all be rescinded, and, you know, the Democratic Party is fractured, and we don't have any real leadership right now. And a lack of leadership doesn't mean you fall down to your base instincts. It means you rise to the occasion. Maybe you're the leader we need. You know, maybe you're going to learn something or see something that you know can affect somebody. And I'm telling you, awareness and love is the way into that. You have to think about the suffering of others and not, you know, react to it in a self-indulgent way that paralyzes you, but react to it with love. You know, how do I bring more light and truth and joy into this world? How do I comfort those who are sick and suffering? How do I make life better for that bewildered mom on the border who's standing there with her 3 kids who've been waiting for months, and she's probably told them all kinds of stuff about how they're going to get to the U.S. and they're going to live in a nice place and they're going to go to a nice school and sleep in a nice bed and have nice food to eat and a birthday party. You know, they're going to get through this because that's what moms do. Moms in tough times know how to keep their kids full of hope and love. You know, sometimes that's all they have is a promise of the future and how things will be better. You just hang on. I got you. And then they get to the border and it all falls apart and they panic and they have nowhere to go and they can't go back home, you know, because they're fleeing a horrible situation that we've made horrible by our own economic policies, right? And years of imperialism. But a guy like Trump and his followers aren't smart enough to parse all that. They don't have the moral weight to understand our role in the world and in the global south and how we have a responsibility to look after people that we've exploited and abused so we could live privileged and rich. Not all of us, but many of us, and certainly our corporations. Now those corporations don't want to give back. They want more. Okay? So they buy politicians that do these horrible things to appeal to the ignorant among us and their racism and their xenophobia and punish people publicly as a spectacle to appease dumbasses who are living in fear. You know? Boogeyman fear. Fear that some frat boy's telling them on Fox News there's an invasion. There's no invasion. Those are hardworking men and women looking for a safe place to raise their kids. That's not an invasion. You know, that's life. That's a result of the world we're living in. And you need to make it better. You need to find a way to insert that situation with love and light and some hope for those people. And we can do it because there's more of us that care than there are these awful people. The awful people are just louder. And whoever lies the loudest these days wins. And that's the rule we need to change, right? That's the ideal we can't lose sight of. That's what I'm talking about when we can't change who we are. We can't cut corners with our own morality. Because once you do that, it's a slippery slope. That's what you learn in recovery. You can't take shortcuts because they eat at you. You think, I can just take this one pill this one night, not tell anybody about it. I need to sleep. I haven't slept in a couple days. And you take the pill. Then you take another one the next night. So on. All of a sudden you're not sober and you got this big secret inside because you're cutting corners. You know, that's what a 10th step is. You're trying to be honest and accountable to somebody else and, you know, because you don't want to degrade your own morality. Because what happens when you do that is you start feeling so bad and you get filled with so much guilt and shame and remorse that then you have to take a substance or a behavior to get out of yourself and feel better. Right? So you don't want to get in that cycle. And you don't want to get in a national cycle of that. You know, and that's the danger of the moment we're in because, you know, Trump will make us sick before we make him well, right? If that makes any sense. You know, it's like we're in an abusive relationship. Alcoholism and addiction is a family disease, right? That's why Al-Anon exists. Because even though they're not drinking the wives and the kids and the husband or whoever it is who isn't, you know, the qualifier is also getting spiritually sick from that behavior because it bends everything around you. And there's all this chaos and fear and insecurity and you start changing your behavior because you want to appease, you know, the crazy maker in your life. And that's who Trump is. He's a crazy maker. So that's why people like, oh, I'll let him have that one. I'm not even going to pick that fight with him. You know, that's how he has the whole GOP. They're all cowed. They're all abusive little lushes like, you know, Lindsey Graham. So they're either like completely coddled lushes or they're scared. You know, these aren't men. These aren't leaders. These aren't tough guys, Dan Crenshaw and all these little cartoon characters. These men and women are feeling the moment so epically that history will not be kind to them. Okay? This is not a highlight in American history, to state the obvious. And anybody who went along with this should be ashamed for eternity. Because that's how much is at stake. You know? End of rant. I'll pick up this guitar. We've had a couple losses in the music world since the last time I spoke. Garth Hudson, who I got to meet more than once when I lived up in Woodstock. Last time I saw Garth was sitting around Levon's kitchen table. Not to brag, but that was a cool place to be. I was there with Jackson Browne, and we were doing a show at the Ramble that night. And I'd always seen Garth around town. I'd been in and out of Woodstock since I was a little kid. I lived in a tent there with my dad. Was the first place I stayed in Woodstock. But I got a long history there as a kid and an adult. And whenever I would see Garth in like the Hurley Ridge Market or something, I'd be like, that's Garth Hudson, man. You know, a giant. He brought all that musicality to the band. You know, there was a lot of other people that sort of like stuck out more, but that guy was the real deal and the last surviving member of the band. I lived in Rick Danko's house, his old house at one point. He was already gone, but they had a lot of association. The family I rented it in went way back with the band, and I always think of those guys in those walls, you know. And then we lost Sam Moore, the great Sam Moore, who I had the pleasure of working with many times. A lot of my friends were in his band. My ex-girlfriend sang in his band for a while. She was one of his backup singers. Sam was a very soulful guy. Last time I saw him was in Tucson. We were doing a benefit for Gabby Giffords with CSN and Jackson and Nils Lofgren, a bunch of great people. And I remember seeing Sam backstage, you know, and he saw me at the end of the night. Turned to me as I was leaving. And he said, "Hey, you keep on loving." And he said the name of this singer in his band. "You keep on loving." I won't say her name. I didn't keep his promise, but I tried, you know. But that's who he was. He was a soul man, you know. Sam and Dave, if you're not familiar. And then Barry Goldberg, who I toured with, who was another organ player. He played a B3, whereas Garth played the Lowry organ, gave the distinct sound to the band. The B3 is what you're thinking of when you think of an organ in blues music. That's the big wooden thing like Booker T plays, you know. So Barry Goldberg was a legend. He was in Mike Bloomfield's band. He and Mike Bloomfield grew up together in Chicago. You know, he played with Hubert Sumlin, and he played with Howlin' Wolf, and he formed the Electric Flag, which was a 60s kind of, you know, Fillmore band. And I toured with him. He was in a band with Stephen Stills called The Rides, and we toured for a couple years in the U.S. And Barry was in Dylan's band when he went electric at Newport, which is probably in the movie. I haven't seen it, but, you know, the famous day when he came out and played Like a Rolling Stone and Pete Seeger got all pissed off. So Barry used to tell me all those stories late at night. He was a swell guy. He and his wife, Gail. I still have a journal they gave me out in my studio in the barn. He was like, "You better fill these up with songs." I'm working on it, Barry. And then Mark Cohn, one of my friends and musical heroes, just a phenomenal songwriter and singer who I've had the pleasure again of doing a lot of gigs with. A real friend to all the artists that I've worked with, and just a remarkable talent. He announced today that he's had Parkinson's disease for the last 5 years, and he didn't want to go public with it. And he's still gigging, and he doesn't have any, super debilitating issues yet, but that's obviously a tough situation, so I'm sending a lot of love out to Mark. Mark wrote Walking in Memphis. That's probably what you guys know him. But Silver Thunderbird, you know, listening to Levon, if you know that song. I'm getting obscure on you, but to tie it into the band, man. I was telling you about rehab before. When I got out of rehab, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to go back into TV or whatever, you know, which had been my career before that and the music stuff. And I was kind of doing real estate for a minute. I was doing like what they call sober jobs. And a friend of mine worked at a radio station, and she said, "Mark Cohn is coming in to do an interview. You know, we're doing it like for an hour. It's like a special or something. He's going to play a few songs. You want to come and sit in the studio and watch?" and I did. And I'd met Mark on shows before, but we weren't really friends yet, and we sort of became friends that day. And it inspired me to kind of get back in the business. And then we crossed paths quite a lot. So sending him a lot of love. A handsome cat too, man. Real just stylish guy. He was actually one of the guys that, like, when I sort of went back into comedy, which I'd done in drama school, but kind of I did a lot of improv and stuff in the years I was touring with bands, but I wasn't doing a ton of it. And I was trying to write songs, and I was sitting at a dinner with Mark one night, and I was telling him about that ex who sang in the other band, who I had a lot of, a tumultuous little thing with. And I told him about a song. He goes, I met her. I had dinner with her at some celebrity's house. You know what I mean? Judy Collins' house, not to name drop, with her fiance or something. I think she's married now. But he goes, I had dinner. And I said, well, I wrote this song about her. And he goes, what's it called? And I said, it's called Suicide by Redhead. And he laughed, and I was like, it wasn't meant to be funny. But Mark was always the guy who brought the humor out in me, Every time when Jackson Browne would play the Beacon, Mark, he lives on the Upper West Side, he would always come over. They would always save a seat for him. And I remember seeing him one time, and he goes, man, Jackson looks so good. Jackson's a good-looking dude. He was like, Jackson looks so good. I can't believe it. And I said, we got a painting at the end of the tour bus. In the back of the tour bus, there's this painting, and you don't want to see what the painting looks like. And he just thought that was the funniest thing in the world. The portrait of Dorian Gray. It's a reference. But anyway, he laughed a lot at it. And, when you make people you admire laugh, it does something to you. You're like, hey, maybe there's something there. So, shout out to those fine folks. Love never leaves us, and the music certainly doesn't, and they've all given us a lot, so listen to soulful music too. That's another way to get through this, rely on the things that make you feel better, because you're going to need all the comfort, It's a 3-dog night. You know what that is? The band, but it's 3-dog night means it's so cold out you need 3 dogs on your bed. That's what we're in now, but we'll get through it together, all right? So enough of a rant. Enough of a podcast. I'm sorry to talk for so long. I'll come back soon, I promise. Sign up for Noel's Notes on Substack. I appreciate all you who are reading and supporting it. Thank you for listening. As I said, I'm not on social media a lot, so if you can share this or whatever, do it, because I'm just going to put it out there and then I'm going to step away. All right? So I love you guys. Peace.